Hey, this is Dr. C. Thanks for joining me again today. Since it's the season for respiratory illnesses, we're going to talk about kind of the big triad. At least that's what the paper likes to call it, the big triad of infectious respiratory illnesses. COVID-19, the flu, and RSV. So we're going to talk about the vaccines now for all of these, the three illnesses that are supposedly the bad actors for respiratory illnesses. Now, they're not the only things that cause respiratory illnesses. A bunch of different viruses. There's adenovirus, there's rhinovirus, there's a bunch of different ones, but the ones that really are significant are the ones that can kill you, especially in our age range. And I got to always emphasize that. The elderly are always in the worst age range for the respiratory illnesses. So we're here to talk about them. Let's do it. First of all, what the heck is a virus? What is it? Well, all it is the nuclear material, that is the nucleic acid material that's in our DNA and RNA, just a little packet of that nucleic acid and a protein envelope. That's it. That's it. That's what the virus is. The key thing about a virus is that it can't individually replicate. Now, what the heck? All of the animals in the world, us, humans, etc., we're here to replicate. Go forward and multiply. That's the trees do it. The plants do it. The animals do it. We do it. But the poor viruses can't do it unless they invade into another cell. And then they take over that cell, take over the organism, and reproduce their virus. That's the key about the viruses. So you have DNA viruses and RNA viruses. Got both. So we're going to talk about a couple of the RNA viruses. First of all, COVID-19. Okay, COVID-19. What about the vaccine now for COVID-19? Because really that's the bottom line. We're talking practicality here. Practicality. What do we look for in a vaccine against COVID-19? Well, before COVID-19, if I were giving a talk, and I gave a talk on immunizations in general, we talked about how to produce different types of vaccines. And we talked about what they call inactivated vaccines. The virus is inactivated. What does that mean? That means it no longer has that pathologic result. Yet, it can still stimulate an immune response in your body. Remember, in your body you have a dual response to any invasive virus or bacteria or whatever. You get the immediate response, which is basically the immunoglobulin response. That's coming from the B-type lymphocytes. And you also then get, because of the memory cells, you get a cellular response. And that is the killer T cells. Okay, so those are all lymphocytes and macrophages as well. So those are our immune responses to a virus or a bacteria that's pathologic. Now, when you're developing the vaccines, you can inactivate that particular virus or bacteria by passing it through a cell line. So usually they use things like eggs or mammalian cells or moth cells or whatever, but they have to pass it through a number of times, and that gradually, because of genetics, because of natural evolution of those genes, you can deal then with inactivated. It still can develop your immune response, but it can't infect you like it did before. So that is an inactive, and many of our vaccines are using an inactivated vaccine. Now, some of them also put what they call an adjuvant in with it. Now, an adjuvant is a protein substance that will improve the ability of your body to fight. In other words, it improves your immune system against a particular invasive virus or bacteria. That's pure and simple. That's what an adjuvant does. Now, we used a lot of different things like aluminum salts, etc. And all. Nowadays, they use several different types of adjuvants. So that is another type of vaccine. It's an adjuvant-based vaccine. Now, what's available on the market right now for COVID-19 vaccine? Well, first of all, we're all very, very familiar now with messenger RNA. Remember, messenger RNA has the ability then to go from that DNA or RNA or wherever they copied, whatever thing they copied in that cell, they take it out of that cell and bring it, messenger, to another cell so that you can deliver things around the body. That's how we regenerate our bodies all the time. We're regenerating all of our cells all the time. So that's how they do it, with that messenger RNA. So mRNA, that's what it stands for. So we have two mRNA vaccines. One of them, of course, is Pfizer. The other is Moderna. And the two of them together, those companies made billions last year, billions of dollars. So they're still available this year. And this year's mRNA is against one particular strain of COVID. It's against the KP2. That's a variant. It's an Omicron variant. Now, the parent of all those KPs is a species called JM1. So, okay. So that is, it's JN, not M, JN1. So the Moderna and the Pfizer are against the KP2, and supposedly, even though KP2 is not the highest species anymore, that's going down. Now it's KP3, KP315. It's still effective against the newer Omicron variants. What others besides those two are available? Well, we also have Novavax. Now, Novavax is not an mRNA vaccine. It is more traditional vaccine. It's called a protein subunit. What it did is that on the spikes that come out of that COVID, on the surface of those spikes, there are certain proteins on there that have a particular goal in life. Some of them will stick to a cell to help you get into your host cell. Some of them have other types of activities that they do, but there are some particular ones that you can take away and purify. And it's those particular subunits of that spike protein that are in the Novavax vaccine. So that's what the subunit vaccine is. Now there's another type of vaccine that's not available in the United States, and that's a viral vector vaccine. That's what they use in Russia. They use it in a number of European countries. They use an adenovirus. They pick out an adenovirus that can easily get into the body, but it's not very pathologic. So they use that. They put the viral particle inside as a vector. They put it inside, let the adenovirus get in, and then they can have that adenovirus vector present it to the cell, and then the cell can discharge it and then develop the antibodies towards it. So those are the different types of vaccines for COVID-19. Now, I just got the Moderna because that's what my pharmacy had. They've always had the Moderna vaccine, and so, okay, I'll get the Moderna. If they happen to have the Pfizer, I would have gotten that. If they happen to have the Novavax, I would have gotten that. But we're kind of forced into which of the vaccines that you get for COVID-19 because it's what happens to be available at the pharmacy that happens to be approved by your insurance. So at least we're not, when you go to an approved pharmacy, you get what they have. Okay, you get what they have. So, and it may be one of the two mRNAs because there's not as many of the Novavax vaccine dispensaries around. Okay, so, and remember too, that you can have some side effects from these vaccines as well. Not emphasized as much. They don't like to emphasize side effects, but you can get a side effect from them. Most of them are the typical ones like a sore arm, like a headache, maybe a little nausea, malaise, fatigue. They call it brain fog. That usually lasts for just a couple of days and then goes away. Personally, I had a little soreness in my arm. That was it. Okay. So, at any rate, that's the COVID for this fall. Get it now. Definitely, if you're my age, 84 or more, you better get the vaccine. Okay. Now, it also, you listen to the TV, they tell you need to get the flu shot too. After all, it's flu season. No, it isn't yet, because there's two spikes generally to the flu season. One spike is in December, the other spike is in February. Okay, you want to get it now. You may not be as resistant in February if you get it now. I usually get mine in mid-October. That covers me usually pretty well. So, what vaccines are available for the flu? Well, again, there's several types of vaccines that are available. Number one, you can get the high dose, which is basically called also the senior dose. Now, it's a high dose because it gives you 4 times the amount of antigen that a regular dose would give you. I usually get the high dose. Why not? Little better protection, minimal additional side effect. I get that. Nowadays, most people are getting the quadrivalent. It's a vaccine against 2 of the flu A and 2 of the flu B species. So quadrivalent, 4 different species covered. Usually the early spike in December is from the A. Usually the spike in February is from a B. So what they do is they will see what most likely will be the candidates of the flu that are going to be in our area for this season. And so they pick out the most likely ones based on what happened last year in the southern hemisphere that's going to come up to the northern hemisphere this fall. So we're being protected then against 2 of the A's, and we use the H1N1. Now, what the hell is an H and an N? Well, the H stands for hemagglutinin. That is a surface protein that allows a virus to get in. It attaches. So it's a protein that's on the surface, attaches to a cell in the body, allows the virus to get in. So that's H, hemagglutinin. There's also neuraminidase. That is another surface protein. This one will allow that stuff that's in the cell, got in the cell through that hemagglutinin. Now it's producing some virus in the cell. That's got to get out. The neuraminidase allows it to get out of that cell and into the general cell population of that organism. Okay, so that's the H and that's the N. So this season, we have the vaccine against the H1N1 and H3N2. Those are really the 2 major species, you might say, of the flu that have been around for quite a few years now, but still the major ones out there. There are many others. Heck, we got 17 different hemagglutinins, H1 all the way to H17. We have 10 neuramidases, N1 to N10. You multiply 10 times 7, that's 170 different varieties, you might say, of the flu. But it's just those 2, the H1N1 and the H3N2, that are the biggies. So that's what the protection is going to be against. Now, I mentioned now that we got other vaccines besides just the general coverage like that. You have the quadrivalent and you have a trivalent. You may, with the standard one, you may only get a trivalent, 2 A's, 1 B, which is fine. Fine for the general population, not as fine when you're a senior. Okay, so basically that is the general coverage. Now, how many of the different high-dose vaccines for flu are there out there? Well, I'm going to get next week. I wait 2 weeks in between getting my COVID and flu vaccine. Because if there is a problem, which one of the 2 gave you the problem? So you've got to, I split them up. And besides, it's still a little early yet to get my flu vaccine. So I got the Moderna, which is called Fluzone. Fluzone. Fluzone is for over 65, and it has 4 times the amount of antigen in it. That's why it's called high dose. Okay, what are the other preparations? Well, let's say that you've had trouble because you're allergic to eggs or something like that. Well, there's a thing called Flucelvax. Flucelvax. That's a cell-based, not an egg cell, not eggs. It's not grown on eggs. It's grown on mammalian cells. So it's egg-free, and therefore it's a good vaccine for people who have a sensitivity to eggs, Flucelvax. We also have a thing called Fluad, F-L-U-E-D, A-D, Fluad. That uses an adjuvant. Remember, an adjuvant improves your immune response to a particular virus or bacteria. So it has an adjuvant. And they use as an adjuvant, actually, squalene oil. Now, squalene is a protein that we find in the bark of a soap tree. The soap tree grows in Chile. How they come up with these things, I don't know, but that's what the Fluad does. And so it's a good vaccine. Gives you almost the same response as the others. And so it's available on the market as well. And the final one that's available is called a recombinant. It's called a recombinant. And the name of it is called flu block. Flu block. That doesn't give you the concentration of antigen that I would get with 4 times the amount. It gives you 3 times the amount of antigen. But nevertheless, they use a protein adjuvant. That means it recombines with a protein to give you the immune response. That's for over age 18, and it is used in seniors as well. The final one that's available is a spray. Of course, that's not for seniors. It's only up to age 49, age 2 to 49. In fact, the FDA just approved self-administration of the nasal vaccine for flu. But remember, only up to age 49. So for most of you, that's not even available. Okay, so that is it on the flu. Now, you'll notice too when they tell you if you're immunocompromised, you got to be careful, you got to take your vaccine. Well, tell me, what the heck does it mean to be immunocompromised? Well, I don't know. Remember, only 3 to 5% of people are immunocompromised. What do you have to be immunocompromised? Well, you could have it genetically. There are genetic deficiencies in immunoglobulins and in your own immune system. There are some diseases like HIV that wipes out your immune system. Some medications like high-dose steroids, that can do it as well. People who have to be on steroids for a longer period of time. People who have had transplants, they have to use medication to keep that immune system in check. People with autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, stuff like that, lupus, they usually have very poor immune responses. People who are on chemo or radiation therapy for cancer. People who have had their spleen taken out for whatever reason. These are all immunocompromised patients. So next time you hear that term, you know exactly what they're talking about. They don't, but you do. That's why I'm here, to give you that information. Okay, what else? RSV. Now, most of the pulmonary people tell you, you got to get RSV, you got to get RSV. Well, I looked into it a bit. There's a certain very low incidence of what's called Guillain-Barré syndrome when you get your RSV vaccine. Now, that's not a pleasant thing. Guillain-Barré is an inflammation in that spinal cord, and it can be anywhere up and down that spinal cord. So depending on where you get that transverse myelitis, everything from there down is wiped out. Yeah, it's transient, it comes back, but for several months, you may have a big issue with that Guillain-Barré. Wonderful. So there are 3 vaccines that are approved for respiratory syncytial virus. Respiratory syncytial virus hits infants, very young. The very young it causes bronchiolitis and can cause a little pneumonia. And the elderly, especially the older elderly, like over 75, hits them. They can get a pneumonia, and there's a certain mortality rate to that pneumonia. And in fact, roughly about 12,000 people last year died, seniors died of respiratory syncytial virus, pneumonia. So there are 3 of them that are out there. And let me tell you a little bit about them. GlaxoSmithKline, which is the company that, one of the immunosuppressive agent companies, RXV, RXV, that's their particular vaccine, and Pfizer has one called Abruzva. Now, these are protein subunit vaccines. In other words, they took a protein on the surface of the virus and developed it, processed it, so it's no longer infectious, but it can still develop an immune response. So those two, the Pfizer and the Glaxo. Now, Moderna also has one for respiratory syncytial virus called mRespio. That's an mRNA vaccine. Now, the mRNA is new kid on the block, basically producing vaccines like this. But you're going to see more and more vaccines against many different things, because once we knew all of the genetic code and can define where the problem in the genes exists, they now have the technology to isolate that gene and to produce antibodies towards that. It's amazing what they can do now with the mRNA technology. So, is it effective? Yes, it is, but it does have the potential for some serious side effects. Not a high potential, but enough to get me a little nervous. So what do you do if you have a reaction to your vaccine? There is called a Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, VAERS. And you can report either online or get their form online and send it in. That gives the information about the particular adverse effect you had to that vaccine. Now, right now, the statistics that are given to you about the number of cases and the adverse effects, minimal compared to what's out there. So it's not being reported that widely. But this VAERS, VAERS, is out there, and I would encourage you, if you had a side effect, to use it. Okay, I think I've talked myself out. This is Dr. C. Get your shots. Have a good day.